First tonight, Kenyan police have opened fire on a charging crowd of protesters in the capital, Nairobi. They've also used tear gas and blocked roads to stop people from getting to the city centre. The main government-funded human rights organization says 10 people have died and at least 29 have been injured in protests in various parts of the country. Earlier, a hospital in Nairobi said it had received the bodies of 2 people who died from gunshot wounds. Demonstrations were due to be held across Kenya to mark the 35th anniversary of the historic Saba Saba protests and unrest that launched the country's push for multi-party democracy in 1990. Many towns are reported to be deserted for fear of violence. Well, let's take you to the Middle East now. And what chance is there that the agony in Gaza could be reaching, if not an end, but at least a reprieve? 2 sets of talks, thousands of miles apart, could be key in determining where next for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians suffering in the enclave and the desperate families of the hostages still being held inside Gaza. Well, a Palestinian official says the latest round of indirect talks between Israel and Hamas on a ceasefire in Gaza has ended without any breakthroughs. But the discussions in Qatar are reported to be resuming again later today. Over in Washington, President Trump is meeting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today. Ahead of their talks, Mr. Trump was sounding optimistic that a deal might be struck this week, which would lead to a 60-day ceasefire and the return of some of the hostages in Gaza.
We hope that they accept the conditions that were put forward and that this war ends and we live in peace. We are suffering a lot as we live in tents. We get displaced. We sleep and wake up to the sound of warplanes bombardment. Once it's dark, we start saying that they bombed this area or that area. There is no safety and we want to return to how we were. May God's mercy be on those whom we've lost and may those in prison be set free. We want to live a decent life, as we were living. We are seriously tired.
We want the war to end eventually. It is not possible for people to remain living this way. We want to see the last episode of this story of torture that we are living. What is happening is not logical. We want these negotiations to be serious and lead to a truce, to a ceasefire. Other than that, it's a waste.
Well, we'll have more on moves towards that ceasefire deal in a moment. But before that, Israel says it's carried out intense airstrikes against the Yemeni ports of Hodeidah, Rasisa and Saif. An Israeli spokesman said the Houthis were using the ports to transfer combat equipment for what he called terrorist plots. The IDF also struck a power station and a ship that was hijacked by the group 2 years ago, which it said was monitoring maritime traffic in the Red Sea. The extent of the damage isn't yet clear. Shortly after the strikes, the Israeli military said it attempted to shoot down 2 missiles launched from Yemen. Well, for more on the possibility of a ceasefire in Gaza, I'm joined now in the studio by the Palestinian Middle East analyst Ramzi Ibrahim Abu Ibrahim. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me today with you.
Do you think it is likely that a ceasefire in Gaza will be agreed this week? Are you optimistic seeing Donald Trump speaking with such certitude?
I hope by next tomorrow or next day after, Trump will announce the ceasefire stop.
Right. What makes you so confident?
If Trump can stop the war between Israel and Iran in one call, he can stop this war. And I told you before, it's Trump going to stop this war. I am optimistic, and I am very sure this time around, Trump is willing to stop the war.
Does it depend on how much pressure there is on Prime Minister Netanyahu from President Trump?
In the last few days, if you look the action of Netanyahu and his prime ministers and his ministers and cabinet, you will see different speech. You will see all the speech is silent. No one is allowed to speak. In this matter, even the negotiation, it's also a silent negotiation, because Trump wants himself to have the glory to come out and says, I have stopped the war in Gaza.
Well, Trump wants to win the Nobel
Definitely,
Prize.
definitely. He wanted that. And I believe he will put pressure, much pressure, on Netanyahu this time around for stopping the war in Gaza.
Well, one of the big sticking points appears to be Hamas remaining in Gaza. The Israelis say they want Hamas out. Hamas says that is unacceptable. Do you see that being resolved?
It will be resolved. Trump has sent many delegations to speak directly with Hamas. Trump, and not only Trump, none of the whole world can stop having negotiation with Hamas direct. Hamas, it's not only militant group. Hamas is a political. They have won election before, and they are existing in the nation, in everywhere, in every part of home. You must see one or two persons have the closest idea of Hamas. Hamas wants freedom of the Palestinians like any other political group. If you give the freedom of the Palestinians, you will not see any disturbance. Why, if you take me back to October 7, why October 7 came 2023, it is because of much prisoners under the Israeli occupation prison. For a long period of time, they are suffering. Today we have seen after 2 years, 21 months of war, 650 days, we can see Israel claiming that they have won the war, while killing of the children. We have about 57,000 people died, martyrs of the Palestinians, and we have 135,000 injured. After all this, with the demolition and destroying of the whole area of Gaza, you will call that winning of the war. Okay, you win the war, but we are still existing in our land. And we still want the same question, the freedom of the Palestinians. Give us the freedom to live at this century of life, at this age of life. We will continue from where we have stopped. And we rebuild Gaza again. And we shall get our freedom. There is no hope except having the freedom to the Palestinians. You want to exist, we have to exist. The existence of the Palestinians, after all this genocide, after all what you have tried, you must surrender and say, yes, the Palestinians has rights to live.
Well, the interesting thing is that all the military commanders, I'm told, in Israel have actually told Benjamin Netanyahu that they've done all they can do militarily, that there's nothing more they can do.
Remember, Zamir, who brought him, it is Netanyahu. And Zamir is the closest commander. He is the head of the army. To Netanyahu, he came up and tell him clearly, what do you want us to do with 2 million in Gaza? We have destroyed the image of Israel internationally. We have broken the international law clearly in a daytime. Then what do you need again? We cannot continue. You have to get to a limit. Zamir has tried the last 2 months after he has gotten the seat as the chief of commander of the army, he has tried to do his best. Look, when last time you called me and you asked me about the aid, the American aid, the company, the American company, which
the Humanitarian Foundation,
you will find the American company today, it is salvation weapon killer of the Palestinians, because daily we have about 48 to 50 Palestinians died who are asking for the aid. And it has failed. Why? Because Israel does not want to comply with the United Nations, which has been existing since 1948 in Gaza and where the Palestinians are living around the world.
Right. Well, do you think, I mean, just returning to moves towards getting a ceasefire, do you think Hamas has accepted the notion that they will not get any guarantees that the war will actually end? So they may be willing to actually do this 60-day ceasefire and release 10 of the hostages, but that's simply because they're in such a difficult situation.
No, you see, the Palestinians, they have lost. The only paper they have is the hostages. They have lost everything. It's only the hostages remain. Okay, in 60 days, on this deal, on the first few days, the second or the third day of the deal, Hamas will release 8, and it will remain 2. On the 5th day of the deal, they will release the last 2 of the 10. And the assurance comes from Trump that within the 60 days, negotiation continue to end finally the war. The problem we might have, it is how the aid enter Gaza and the distribution of the aid.
Because Hamas is calling for this humanitarian foundation to stop work.
Definitely. Yeah. It's not acceptable. Today, the last few days, you will see some attacks to this aid company which is distributing. Some attacks came to them because the Palestinians, they will neglect them.
Some of their workers said they were
definitely
injured.
They will neglect them.
Right.
The last speech I want to say, or the last word, I'm urging every single Nigerian, every human in Africa, to have a feeling of the Palestinians and say one word to support ending of this war. We have to leave. We are human. We are human.
Indeed. Indeed.
We ask the leaders of Africa to stand by Palestine and to stop this war.
Assuming the ceasefire is agreed this week, as you seem to think and Donald Trump seems to think, what do you see as the long-term plan for the Palestinians? Do you think Israel or the Americans have a day after plan for Gaza?
Sure, they have a day after. Definitely, they have a day after.
Plan?
Yes.
And what is that day after plan, do you think?
To me, Israel will leave Philadelphia area.
The Philadelphia corridor.
Yes.
Right.
And will leave the gateway of Rafah, between Rafah and Egypt. They have 2 options, either to give it under the United Nations control or the Arab control between Qatar and Egypt and some other countries which might join later for the period of time and for rebuilding Gaza. Because Gaza need rebuild. Gaza need minimum 10 years of removing the destruction of what happened in this war and start rebuilding Gaza again. So my thinking is we have a brighter future to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians have let the whole world hear their sufferings, their killing, and asking the whole world, if you can see the European the Americans, the Latin Americans stand up and say, yes, Gaza or Palestinian has to be free. For God's sake, we have to be free.
And what about the Israelis? Do you think they're entitled to feel secure in their homeland?
Look, occupation, it is the matter of the occupation. And the occupant has to give the right to the landowner. Whether in the West Bank or Gaza or East Jerusalem or Jerusalem, Palestine has to get the freedom. Whether Israel like it or not, this war is the longest history in Israel war with Arabs or with the Palestinians. Israel was shocked of what the poor Palestinians in Gaza have done. They have stood up to say, yes, we need our freedom. We have about 10,000 Palestinian prisoners, some of them 40 years in the prison, some of them 35 years. Some died in the prison. Nobody in the world hear about them. And they were all prisoners for one word, free Palestine.
On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. And I do hope that some resolution is brought to that awful conflict in Gaza. Ramzi Ibrahim Abu Ibrahim is a Palestinian Middle East analyst. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.